Welcome back, traders. This is Ryan with another market preview. I'm finally back from my trip from Thailand. It was such a blast. I can't wait to go back. But now that I'm back, I'm going to be working on some profit videos for you guys and giving you some updated prices. So make sure you subscribe and you have your notifications turned on so you don't miss out when those videos come out. But for this video, I'm going to give you my opinion and my outlook for the market in the upcoming week, starting with the dollar index on the weekly chart. So I'm going to be zooming into the price action here, but I want to remind you that we have a monthly SIBI right here and a monthly BISI, and let's go ahead and zoom in. Here I have my weekly drawn liquidity above these relative highs up here. We can see that price rallied up into a daily SIBI and then left it, leaving relative highs up here as well. I do think the market is going to revisit the relative highs up here, but it may retrace down into a discount from this high to this low. We can see that equilibrium is right about here. I'm going to take that off. So far, we have been dropping down into this order block on the weekly. We can see that we wicked down and now we are above it. But the market can reach down into the sell side here and into the fair value gap on the weekly chart. Here, this weekly candle I have as an order block. I marked out the mean threshold. I do not want to see price close below this order block. Ideally, I want to see somewhere around here create a market structure shift, perhaps on the daily or the 4-hour, and then I'll be looking for the relative highs back up here. But should we get closure below the mean threshold here, then I think price can come back to revisit the volume balance right here, even take the low down here or reach for a lower inefficiency. Here we have the daily for the dollar index, and remember my draw on liquidity on the weekly is above here, but I'm going to zoom in here to the most recent price action, and you can clearly see the relative highs up here that I'm looking for. But price is dropping at the moment. There's a fair value gap that this is Friday's candle, May 17th. Price reached up into it and then closed below it, so this kind of leads me to think that we will be sweeping the sell side right here and going back down into this inefficiency down here. Also, we had a order block over here. I drew out the mean threshold. You can kind of see it's a dotted line in purple. I don't really want to see closure below this mean threshold on a daily basis, but it can wick down into it, and I want to see some sort of market structure shift before I aim for the relative highs up here. Now, if this weekly mean threshold gets violated, then we could be visiting the volume imbalance lower. So even though I want to see price go higher, we have no indication of that just yet. We have to wait for our market structure shift. So currently the bias is going to be bearish for the dollar index. So for the indices, we saw that they did make all-time highs once again, but since we are going to be bearish for the short term for the dollar index, for the indices, I think we're going to have to be bullish. Here we have S&P on the weekly, and last week I did say that price could potentially go and take out the all-time highs if we violate this mean threshold on this order block here. And as you can see, last week when we did violate the mean threshold, it went up here fairly quickly within 1 or 2 days. So like I said, in the short term, I'm going to be bullish for the indices, even though I have my weekly drawn liquidity down here, but I'm not really going to keep my eyes on those until we see some sort of market structure shift. We have an inefficiency here. Now, if price is not trading below here, I'm not going to be bearish. I'm going to remain bullish in my bias unless we see price closing below this fair value gap in the least. But I think we got to go into the lower time frames to get a better picture. Here we have ES on the daily chart, and as you can see, even below the weekly fair value gap, we do have a daily fair value gap and a rather large down candle, so this is going to be the daily order block. So even if price trade below the weekly fair value gap, it can go lower into this daily imbalance or this daily order block. So unless we get a market structure shift that takes out this low right here, I'm not going to be having a bearish bias. Ideally, we get something where it trades down to create relative lows, maybe retrace a little bit, perhaps back to the weekly fair value gap and use it as an inverted fair value gap, and then we can look for lower targets down into our weekly draw on liquidity. Here's Nasdaq on the weekly chart, and pretty much the same story as ES. Once we violated the weekly order block right here, we can see that we went and took out the all-time highs. I do have all these key level and my weekly drawn liquidity down here, but like I said, I'm not going to be looking down here unless we see some sort of market structure shift on the daily. Here's Nasdaq on the daily, and you can see that Thursday we went and took out the all-time highs, but it just went above it, swept, and then Friday we closed below it. There is a daily fair value gap here, so short term it can still rally up higher. But if we do get some retracement, we could come down and rebalance this fair value gap. There is also this daily order block, so it could retrace down here and then rally higher as well. I'm not really going to be looking at this bearishly unless we close below the daily order block at the least, but this low right here will be that market structure shift as confirmation. And similar to ES, I want to see something like a closure below the mean threshold and perhaps create some sort of relative low right here, then have some sort of a retracement into maybe this daily fair value gap for a inverted fair value gap, and then look to take out the relative lows and head for our lower targets. But really I have to see how price behaves, because in the short term we could still rally up even higher. So that's it for this week's preview. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please leave a like on this video. I know we're just kind of waiting around for price to show us what it wants to do, but most of trading is playing that waiting game, so be careful. And until next time guys, safe trading.